Rolling. Okay, we're going to talk about Billy. We're going to talk about the Fat Boys. And we're going to talk about the history of the Fat Boys. So where are we going to start?
At the beginning.
At the beginning.
Actually.
The origins of the Fat Boys. And what year are we talking about?
We're talking about 1971.
1971. And how did you actually get together with Danny Gatton and Dave Elliott?
Well,
Excuse me. Do you want to save any of what's on that blue?
well, it starts off, I was working with Roy Buchanan, and Danny Gatton had been working on the road. Came off the road, was working in a small lounge in Prince George's County, down in Camp Springs. I had some original tunes. I had been fired from the Roy Buchanan band, and I was doing some stuff with Gene Vincent and doing one-nighters. And I had some original tunes. I went down especially to talk to Danny about the tunes. We met at his house, in his apartment. He listened to the tunes. We worked them out, and we went into Mitch Corday's studio. At that time, the studio was down on Peachtree Beach in the hotel, Marifax, where the brick skiller is. We recorded the tunes. Danny was very happy with the way the tunes went. And he says, you know something? I think we ought to put an act together. I said, you know something? I think you're right. So I paid him for the first sessions. And then after that, on this particular tape, he said, forget the pay. You know, we'll just work on these fucking things together. We'll get them right. So the first tapes, we used a guy by the name of Pokey Walls on drums and Jimmy Queen on violin. And we were doing some very strange stuff. And we played pizza parlors. Village Inn pizza parlors. And we kept using different drummers. We were looking for a drummer. We wanted a trio. We didn't want a big band. We wanted a trio. We were looking for a drummer. And Danny and I had been doing the different things. We went down to the Hillbilly Heaven, which was owned by Donna Dixon's father, Earl Dixon. And a guy had gotten in a car accident who played there and sang there. And Danny and I were filling in, and they had a house drummer, Big Dave Elliott, weighed 400 pounds, wore bibbed overalls, horseshoe around his neck. I asked Danny, I said, what do you think? He says, you know, that guy's got some potential. So we snatched Big Dave away from there, went back, did some more pizza parlors. We're working out of my basement, getting the act together, getting the tunes together, doing a half and half, covers and songs that I wrote. And we piled in Dave Elliott's Chrysler convertible, which he incidentally still owns. We went to New York. We played New York. It was very, very successful. We knocked them dead. They loved it. They really did. And we came back to Washington, D.C. Of course, things were the same there. Crowds were slim. And the group was called Fat Chance. But there was already Bill Danoff's group called Fat City. A lot of people were confusing the two. So we needed a new identity. Well, the gigs got slimmer, and Danny got discouraged. And he joined the Liz Meyer band. And then he talked them into enlisting Dave. And then in 1973, this was February of 73, I joined, which was only a couple months after the inception of that. And we did February of '73 until December of or November of 1973 with Liz Meyer doing our own segment. We had our own part of the show where the rest of that was basically a folk and bluegrass band. Everybody else would walk off the stage. We stayed on stage and played our Fat Chance material. And that actually went over better than the rest of the stuff all night. We had already done a couple of months out in San Francisco with Liz Meyer. That had good points and bad points. And when we got back to the East Coast, we all decided to leave Liz Meyer. So we did. We got back into Danny's basement again. And we started working up material that was blues-based, rhythm and blues-based, with a little more punch than we had originally done. And for the lack of a name, Danny and the Fat Boys came up. I have no idea if I had suggested it or Danny did. But Dick Heinze was working with Roy Buchanan at the time and had worked with Danny earlier. And he had vowed to do any gig with us that he wasn't working with Roy Buchanan. Well, that was a plus for us because Roy wasn't working very much at the time. We got Ralph McDuffie, who was a fabulous sax player. So even though we were basically still a trio, a lot of times we had those two guys working with us. By the end of January, we had already rehearsed what was to be our first single, Harlem Nocturne American Music. February, we went into Track Recording Studios and we recorded the song. It came out in April, early April, and was a quite a big regional success. We sold thousands of records in the region, which led us to do an album together. Because by that time already, I had started up my own record label. And so we released that as a single. And then we started working on more stuff. And we were starting to play more. We would go out of town and we'd do colleges. We would make a couple of $1,000s, playing a college. And we did that from 1974. And then we got enough material together by early 1975 to put out an album. So the American Music album came out in 1975. And that was kind of getting a little rocky there. We played with all kinds of different people. We played with the Clovers, and we backed a lot of old rock and roll people during that 1974 period. We did the Virginia Theater shows. Those were great shows. We did those with Bull Moose Jackson, the Spaniels, the Clovers, the Five Keys. We did things with Barry Darvell, who was a rockabilly singer from the metropolitan Washington area. And the musicians changed in the recording studio, not too much live. But we were using Dick Heinze at first, and then Dick Heinze was really busy with Roy Buchanan. We used a guy by the name of Moses Daniels, a keyboard player from Baltimore. We used in the studio we used Robbie Magruder on drums. We used several different sidemen, including Mike Melchoni of the Smut Brothers now. We Jimmy Unger on fiddle. And we kept recording. We had, by the time we finished recording, I guess we had probably had recorded 80 different things. But the 1974 period of time, we were doing mostly songs that I wrote and some rockabilly and rhythm and blues covers, and occasionally some jazz things, but they were not modern jazz things, they were swing things that Danny and I really liked, by Benny Goodman and people like that. And so that kind of brings us up to the end of 1975. 1976, we had some real promising things. We were making good money by early 1976. We had some promises of major label attention by that time. But also, there was, at that time, there was artistic differences were sitting in to the group. We were, Danny wanted to do more what he called redneck jazz or hillbilly jazz. And I was leaning more toward R&B and rockabilly at the time. Dave Elliott was just happy to do either one. He was just hoping that we could decide on something. Danny we had just put out the album, and this is early 1976. The album came out in December of 1975. So the album had only been out actually 1 month, and Danny got discouraged again. And when Danny got discouraged, he quit for a couple of months, which was kind of bad timing, because that meant that there was no band to follow up the album. The album was out and there was no band playing. So unfortunately, of the 3 albums that I had put out, of the Nighthawks, Powerhouse, and Danny and the Fat Boys, that album sold the least. Not because the performance was bad or the album was bad, but basically because there was nobody there. Nobody there to promote the album. There's no band. Wasn't doing anything. And then in the late spring of 1976, we went back out there again and decided to see if we couldn't salvage it, try to make it work. We were playing places that don't exist anymore. We were playing the Child Herald, the Corsican, Cousin Nick's, the Psychedelic, My Friend's House, Charlottesville, Virginia, down in North Carolina. We were playing just around the East Coast. The attitude of the band was too loose to go to New York. By that time, we musically weren't getting along with each other too well. And I had already had plans in the back of my head what I wanted to do. Danny had plans about what he really wanted to do with his career. And Dave Elliott, again, would have gone either way. We're just hoping we would settle our differences and play. But as it went on, the differences seemed to be more differences, bigger differences, lots of artistic differences. I was spending more time with the record company, had less time for the band. Danny was getting sick of doing the tunes. I wanted to progress, and so did Danny, but they were in 2 different ways. We did the summer of '76, and then in November of 1976, which was nearing the 2nd anniversary of our album. Well, I should go back to August of '76, which was a month and a half before that, we did a last chance effort of keeping the band together by doing a live recording. We did it at the Psychedelic, and the performance was really good that evening. We had some special guests. We had Mark Wenner of the Nighthawks as a guest of ours. We had Joe Kojak, who was a student of Danny Gatton's, who played very well. And through the heat was about 104 degrees inside of the Psychedelic, with that many people in there. We did 4 hours worth of live recording, some of it, which of course is going to be on these, issued on these best of tapes. That album never did see the light of day. The group broke up within 2 months of that time. The last scheduled performance of Danny and the Fat Boys was to be at the Psychedelic's annual live broadcast over WHFS. Equipment was late arriving. Tempers flared. Danny went home before I ever even arrived. And that was the very last performance. That was October the 21st. That was the very last performance of Danny and the Fat Boys.